Grazie. It's okay for the sound?
Sì, sì, va tutto bene.
Okay. Cheers. So I will. The text was the title was Future Agriculture, Biodiversity, or Agriculture. I will give you some examples of my thoughts. And I'm coming from Paris. I'm at Sorbonne University. And we all know that agriculture should change in the very next future. And beyond climate change, you have also several other reasons. And for example, here I put the long-term impacts of agriculture on insect declines. It's been 2 or 3 years. We have a lot of articles on the decline of insects, and we can see there on this paper the repartition of the causes. We can see here intensive agriculture, pesticides, fertilizers, deforestations, and other stuff, and warming is there. So we know that agriculture has this long-term impact on insects. And another more subtle effects could be on the soils. And I wanted to show you there some results of the RMQS. It's a French soil quality measurement network. They sampled on all the French territory areas separated by 25 kilometers. So they included everything on the land use. And based on that, they've done a lot of measurements, including biodiversity of microorganisms. And they also produced a French atlas of soil bacteria at the scale of all French territory. And here, for example, we can see on the left-hand side the bacterial diversity in soils in France. On the right-hand side, the total abundance of microbes. And we can see that you can have different areas with high diversity here or very low diversity, and high biomass and low biomass. So this is linked to the history. This is linked to the diverse parameters like pH or climate. But the history and the land use is very, very important. For example, on the bottom left-hand side, you have the region of Bordeaux that you should know for several reasons, and the forest of the Landes. And it is very poor in diversity and in abundance because it was totally remade in the 19th century to plant some forest and to change totally the ecosystem. I think it's very close to the Italian region of Agropontino, next to Latina. So it was something totally changed by human, and we can still see the impact of these on diversity and abundance. And if we are going deeper in what they've found for results based on land use here on bacteria, so you have different land uses, forests, grasslands, crop systems, and separated vineyards and orchards. And the more you are going in extreme agriculture and homogeneous agriculture, the more you are going in negative impacts on diversity and biomass here on bacteria. And for example, if you are looking at vineyards and orchards, the impact is very high. So you can be on the territory, in the mountains, in the plains, in wet areas, in dry areas, whatever the area you are looking at, the impact of agriculture type and land use type is very important. And second thing is that also agriculture should change because it's totally inefficient. I'm working on nitrogen, so I will take the nitrogen example. Here you have the 3 main crops: rice, wheat, and maize at a global level. Here on the left, you can see the total of fertilizers inputs. And here, the percentage of what remains in the biomass. So overall, the nitrogen which is applied remains with this percentage. So you are wasting about 50 to 70% of what is applied as nitrogen. So it's very important, and it has consequences, because this nitrogen applied could switch from ammonium to nitrate, and nitrate could be very lost by denitrification, which produces greenhouse gases like N2O, and also losses through leaching that leads to eutrophication in the ecosystems. So it's still also important to produce food. So to the question biodiversity or agriculture, I think we can do both, and it's the goal of agroecology that could link high input agriculture with natural ecosystems. And the questions that we must ask ourselves is, what do we need from the natural ecosystems to be input in this agriculture, and what should be taken into account in the constraints, and the idea of trade-offs between what we can take from the natural systems and what we must keep in the modern agriculture. And some important levers and principles for agroecology is that it's important to couple ecological processes with evolution and selection. The spatial structure also is very important, because we must get out of the homogeneous agriculture, and the coupling between below ground and above ground processes, and to look at the positive role of biodiversity. In ecology, the hypothesis is that biodiversity improves ecosystems functioning by increasing or stabilizing production. It's something that should be tested in agriculture. And I will finish with two examples, one on crop and biodiversity, and the last one on crop and nitrogen. So the first one was a project that is now finished in France. It was called Wheatomix project. The goal was to mix wheat, and behind that, the hypothesis were that the more you have varieties of wheat in the fields, the more that you can have ecosystem services. And also, normally, the mixing crops should lead to better resistance to parasites, for example, or climate change. And the benefits of mixture is supposed to be higher in low input agriculture, which is very nice to go in more respective agriculture for the environment. And it is also a project that went out in favorable conditions for crop mixings. Here you have data for France for wheat mixtures, and you can see it is 95 to 2015, the very, very high increase of people producing wheat mixtures on the French territory, because people people think that it could be better to resist to the seasonal variation and stuff like that. So it is really a favorable condition. And this was a more than €1 million project on 4 years, multi-actors, with 10 French laboratories, 5 chambers of agriculture, and more than 120 plots on all those sites in the territory. And you can see on the left-hand side, typical plot design. It is totally randomized, and you can go through monocultures to 2, 4, 8, and 16 varieties all mixed together. And it was something very, very nice, because we worked all together. Here, for example, you can see some pictures of, we are putting some isotopic nitrogen to follow this. And you can see some pictures of what is when the wheat is high. And for what results? So we made a lot of thousands of measurements of physicochemistry, plant traits, production resistance, above and below ground biodiversity. Here is a mapping for beetles, for example. And the result is that it could be somehow disappointing, because we have little impact of wheat diversity on the associated biodiversity and functions. But some significant effects were detected. First, you had some controls, better control on pathogens, some small positive effects on spiders, but we really don't know why it occurs like that. And something like, for example, an improved nitrogen cycling by modifying soil bacteria. So the effects are not so clear because we are also mixing years and climates and sites and everything. But some effects could be seen and should be tested. And the conclusions on this type of projects is that it is complex and sometimes unpredictable results, and it's difficult to propose a viable diagnosis. However, mixing crops is not negative. So if mixing crops could have some positive effects, we didn't see any negative effects on wheat production, for example. And the last example is on plant inhibiting nitrification. It's one of my very old research. In the 90s, we discovered that some grasses, perennial grasses in savannas in Africa were blocking nitrification processes in soils. And so it allowed those type of tropical ecosystems to better keep nitrogen in the system, because not going on the nitrate form and then not losing by denitrification or leaching or lixivation. So it was in the 90s. In the 2000 years, our Japanese colleagues from the JIRCAS found molecules inhibiting nitrification, at least bacteria in the soils, and exudated by the tropical grasses like brachiaria, which is used in Brazil for food production. And the science went on, but it was science that was limited to some tiny sectors like ecology of tropical systems or some grasses there. However, 10 years after, people found this type of inhibition in the crops, in sorghum, signal grass, rice, wheat, and now they found this process in maize. So this could be something very important for agriculture if in the future agriculture globally can use plants that inhibit nitrification. We don't have genes yet. However, we are beginning to test this. Here, some grasses that are tested in Colombia. And by testing them, they found that about 20 to 30% N2O emission is reduced by using those type of plants, or nitrogen inputs can be reduced from the same amount for the same plant production. And actually, it will be my last slide. We are testing in Africa by plant mixture. We are here in Ivory Coast, and we are mixing maize there with BNI perennial grasses in the ranks between the maize to see if those plants can enhance maize production for the farmers in the center Ivory Coast. So the response to the questions for me that we can do a lot of things, and agroecology has a lot of cards to play, but we have to do it quick and hoping to have some money sometimes to do all the stuff. Thank you.
Voilà. Thank you, Jean-Christophe.